In the depths of the ocean, where the heavens meet the abyss, lies a place whose mysteries have stirred the minds of humanity for centuries: the Bermuda Triangle. This area of the Atlantic, like a magnet, attracts the attention of researchers, sailors, and all who are interested in the enigmas of history. For over 100 years, it has remained a source of inexplicable phenomena and mind-boggling myths. Over the past 2 centuries, ships and planes have disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a veil of speculation. From tales of supernatural forces ruling the waters to bold hypotheses about natural anomalies capable of swallowing entire vessels, there have been numerous theories. Ships vanished without sending a distress signal, planes dissolved into thin air without leaving even debris, and search expeditions returned empty-handed, only reinforcing the aura of mystery around this place. These events, like pages of a thrilling novel, have inspired writers and filmmakers to create fantastic stories. However, behind each legend lie real tragedies that require careful and impartial study. It is time to look at the Bermuda Triangle through the lens of science, separating the wheat from the chaff of fiction, and try to figure out what is really happening in this mysterious corner of our planet. In the course of this research, archives will be raised, eyewitness accounts will be examined, and all collected data will be analyzed. Particular attention will be paid to those episodes when equipment failed in clear weather, communication was cut off for no apparent reason, and crews disappeared without leaving a single clue, not the slightest hint of what might have happened. What lies behind these inexplicable phenomena? What is the nature of the forces acting in the Bermuda Triangle? The answers to these questions await you ahead. Narratives about the Bermuda Triangle have, over time, become overgrown with many speculations. But in order to get to the truth, it is necessary to focus on reliable facts. The starting point will be the earliest mentions of ship disappearances. Then it is necessary to trace the evolution of this mystery throughout the 20th century and study modern hypotheses that seek to explain the phenomenon. Each individual case represents a chance to analyze what natural phenomena, human errors, or other factors could have triggered the tragedy. In the pursuit of truth, layer by layer, we must uncover what lies in the depths of the mysterious triangle and seek answers buried under a mountain of unfounded assumptions. To understand the scale of the anomalous zone, it is necessary to outline the boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle. It is located in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean and forms a triangle whose vertices are Miami, Florida, Bermuda, and San Juan de Puerto Rico. The area of this water area reaches an impressive 1.5 million square kilometers. For comparison, this is comparable to the territory of France and Germany combined, or half the area of the Caspian Sea. For centuries, these waters have served as a busy crossroads. Important trade routes connecting the New World with the Old passed here. Aircraft plowed the sky, connecting continents, and ships charted routes through this busy region. Marine and air life flourished. However, it was here that events occurred that turned the Bermuda Triangle into a symbol of the inexplicable. With each mysterious disappearance, the aura of mystery around it only increased, intertwining real events with fiction. We are embarking on this historical investigation to get to the bottom of what happened, identify the causes, and unravel the secret of one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. This journey begins with a clean slate, promising a world full of discoveries and food for thought. The first pages of the Chronicle of the Bermuda Triangle secrets were written back in the 9th century, when this area of the Atlantic was already beginning to be overgrown with legends that went beyond the ordinary. One such episode was the encounter of the British ship Ellen Austen with a drifting schooner in 1881, a case abounding in details that turned it into a sea tale. The Ellen Austen sailed the expanses of the Atlantic Ocean, following a course that lay through the area between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. It was a typical trading vessel of the Victorian era, a wooden hull fastened with iron strips, tall masts with taut sails, a crew of experienced sailors accustomed to the vagaries of the sea. The day when everything happened began as usual. The sun was high, reflecting in the smooth water. A light breeze propelled the ship forward, and the horizon seemed endless. Suddenly, a schooner appeared ahead, a small vessel helplessly drifting without signs of life. The sails hung limply, as if human hands had not touched them for a long time. The masts swayed slightly on the waves, and the deck seemed deserted, as if the crew had evaporated. For sailors of that time, such a find was not something extraordinary. Ships often found themselves without a crew due to storms, pirate attacks, or epidemics like cholera, which claimed lives on the open sea. Such a vessel could become a prize for those who found it, a way to help those in need, or an opportunity to earn money by towing it to port. The captain of the Ellen Austen decided to follow maritime tradition and send his men aboard. Several sailors lowered a boat and headed towards the schooner. Gentle waves lapped softly against the sides as they climbed the rope ladder onto the deck of the mysterious vessel. An inspection revealed that the schooner was in excellent condition. The hold contained cargo, possibly bags of wool, crates of tobacco, or barrels of rum, neatly stacked and secured with ropes, as if they had just been checked before setting sail. The sails, although hanging loose, were intact. The rigging was not torn, and the rudder turned with a slight creak, but without effort. In the cabins, there were signs of human presence: a worn book open in the middle, a woolen cloak, a copper pipe with remnants of tobacco on the table next to a pewter mug. There were no signs of struggle, no traces of blood, no broken boards, and no signs of flooding. The schooner looked as if the crew had left it willingly, without haste, leaving everything as it was. The sailors stayed on board to get the schooner moving and follow their ship. The task seemed simple: raise the sails, take control, and escort the find to the nearest port, where it could be handed over to the authorities or sold for a reward. Until that moment, the weather had remained favorable, with a light wind and clear skies. However, everything soon changed. Clouds began to gather, the wind picked up, and a storm was approaching. The waves became enormous, crashing over the sides, and the two ships temporarily lost sight of each other in a curtain of rain and flashes of lightning. The storm lasted for several hours. Water flooded the deck, the wind howled in the rigging, and the horizon disappeared behind a gray veil. When the storm finally subsided, the Ellen Austin returned to its previous location to find its men and the schooner. But there was no one there. The schooner had vanished as if to dissolved in the sea, and with it disappeared the sailors sent aboard. The crew searched the surrounding waters, peering through telescopes, listening to the silence, slowly moving in circles, hoping to notice something. There were no debris, no boats, no slightest trace that there had recently been a ship with people. The sea lay before them flat and empty, as if the storm had swept everything away without a trace. This incident became one of the first strange occurrences associated with the area that would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. The story of the Ellen Austin received wide publicity much later, when it was written about in a newspaper in 940. The story was based on oral maritime traditions passed down from generation to generation, but no documentary evidence, ship logs, official reports, or eyewitness accounts have been preserved. All that has come down to us is based on this publication, which may have embellished the events to attract readers' attention. The mysterious events surrounding the Mary Celeste are woven into the fabric of unexplained events that occurred in the same marine areas. In November 1802, the Mary Celeste, a Canadian-built two-masted vessel, set sail from New York, heading for Genoa. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 crew members. In the ship's hold rested barrels of denatured alcohol intended for Italian customers. The voyage began in favorable weather conditions, foreshadowing a normal transatlantic journey. However, on December 4th, the British ship Dei Gratia, sailing from New York to Gibraltar, discovered the Mary Celeste hundreds of miles from the Azores, near the borders of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Captain David Morehouse, who knew Briggs personally, noticed the brigantine's strange behavior. The sails were half raised, and the rudder was swinging erratically. Attempts to contact the vessel were unsuccessful, and Morehouse sent a group of sailors in a boat to inspect it. Climbing aboard, the sailors found the ship without a soul. The crew had disappeared, as if vanished into thin air, but the ship was in good condition. The cargo remained untouched, except for one broken barrel. The sails and masts were intact, and the hull had no damage. In the captain's cabin lay navigational instruments, a map marked November 25th, Sarah's sewing machine, and children's toys. The sailors' bunks were made, and their personal belongings remained untouched. The ship's log ended with an entry from November 25th, indicating the coordinates of Santa Maria Island. The lifeboat was missing, and the ropes were neatly cut. The compass was broken. About a meter of water was found in the hold, but this did not pose a serious threat to the ship, and the pumps were functioning properly. Valuables and provisions remained in place. The Dei Gratia brought the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, where a thorough investigation began. British authorities inspected the ship, interrogated the crew of the Dei Gratia, but found no signs of violence or disease. Analysis of the alcohol in the barrels revealed no hazardous substances. The story of the Mary Celeste quickly spread through the newspapers, adding to the ominous notoriety of the region. Information about the Mary Celeste has been preserved in official investigation documents from Gibraltar and publications in the British press from 1872, such as The Times. These sources are trustworthy as they are based on eyewitness accounts and the results of the ship's inspection by the authorities. However, the absence of testimony from the crew of the Mary Celeste leaves gaping holes in this mysterious story. The investigation failed to establish the exact cause of the crew's disappearance, giving rise to many conflicting theories. Some suggested that panic caused by alcohol fumes may have forced the crew to abandon ship, but this version was refuted by the analysis results. Others referred to a sudden storm, although meteorological data indicates calm weather. Still others believe that the crew may have left the ship in a lifeboat due to fears of flooding caused by water in the hold, although its level did not pose a critical threat. The latter version, based on a mistaken fear of flooding, seems the most plausible, given the malfunctioning pump and the absence of other obvious threats. Ahead, the reader will find a story about the Cyclops, whose tragic fate in the 20th century will shed light on new aspects of these mysterious disappearances. In 1918, amidst the raging whirlpool of World War I, the American collier Cyclops wrote a tragic page in the Chronicle of Maritime Disappearances. Unlike its predecessors, the sailing ships of bygone eras, the Cyclops was an imposing steel steamship, yet its disappearance without a trace proved just as incomprehensible. The ship, owned by the United States Navy, was on an important mission to transport coal and ore. This 125-meter giant carried 309 people, including crew members, officers, and several civilians, among whom was the U.S. consul in Rio de Janeiro. On March 4, 1918, the Cyclops set sail from the port of Barbados, heading for Baltimore. Its holds were filled with manganese ore, a strategic material for the steel industry that was vitally important in wartime. The weather that day favored sailing, a light breeze and clear skies. The ship was in excellent condition after a recent inspection in port. The Cyclops was last seen leaving the harbor of Barbados. In the early days of the voyage, radio communication with the ship was maintained, but then suddenly ceased. There were no distress signals or reports of problems with the engines, cargo, or weather conditions. The ship seemed to have dissolved somewhere between Barbados and the eastern coast of the United States, in the infamous area of the Bermuda Triangle. When the Cyclops did not arrive in Baltimore by the scheduled date, March 13th, a large-scale search operation began. The Navy deployed ships and aircraft to the area of disappearance, but all efforts were in vain. No trace of the ship or its 309 passengers and crew members was found. The ocean remained silent, as if it had swallowed the ship without a trace. The investigation faced a complete lack of any clues. The Cyclops was a reliable vessel, built in 1911, and was commanded by an experienced officer, Lieutenant George Worley. However, its German origin later gave rise to rumors of sabotage, which were never confirmed. Weather conditions along the route in March 918 remained stable without any major storms. According to meteorological reports, the cargo of manganese ore was considered stable, and the possibility of overloading was ruled out based on data from previous voyages. The story of the Cyclops is captured in official reports of the U.S. Navy and publications in the American press, from 918 in particular in the New York Times newspaper. These materials are based on Navy data and eyewitness accounts from Barbados, but the absence of debris or any radio messages leaves enormous room for speculation. The explanations offered vary widely. Some experts point to a sudden storm not reflected in weather records. Others suggest an attack by a German submarine, although enemy submarine activity in the area was not recorded. Still others put forward versions about cargo instability or engine failure. However, the investigation failed to establish the exact cause of the tragedy, and none of the hypotheses received convincing evidence. The most plausible version seems to be a hidden technical malfunction, possibly a hull fracture under the enormous weight of the ore, which could have led to the ship sinking instantly. Cases like the disappearance of the Cyclops in 918 leave behind a trail of unsolved mysteries. Each such incident, whether involving 9th century sailing ships or 20th century steel vessels, becomes an enigma, accumulating speculations and legends. The waters of the Atlantic hold these dark stories, and around them, the myth of the Bermuda Triangle gradually forms. The mysterious fate of the Cyclops, which occurred in 1918, remains an unsolved mystery, symbolizing the traceless disappearance of a steel colossus. However, the history of mysterious events in the waters of the Atlantic is not limited to isolated incidents, but transforms into a large-scale legend spanning centuries and continents. Tales of vanished ships in this region began to take shape in the 19th century when sea routes became vital for global trade. Sailors of that time exchanged stories about vessels that disappeared without a trace, passing them down from generation to generation in coastal taverns. Some even referred to the records of Christopher Columbus, who, according to legend, observed strange lights and deviations in compass readings near the Bahamas in 1492. His journals mention St. Elmo's fire, electrical discharges occurring on masts during thunderstorms, as a natural phenomenon unrelated to disappearances, and therefore the stories about Columbus are mythological in nature. These rumors, originating from isolated episodes, remained scattered until the 20th century breathed new life into them, combining ancient legends with modern occurrences. It was during this period that the myth took clear shape thanks to the efforts of Vincent Gaddis, who gave it its world-famous name. With the development of technology and the increase in reports of disappearances, these stories began to attract the attention of the general public. By the 20th century, the number of disappearances was growing, especially in the western Atlantic Ocean, where routes between America, Europe, and the Caribbean islands most intensely intersected. The press actively covered each case, adding details and assumptions which fueled public interest. However, the decisive moment came later when one person managed to unite all these disparate stories into a single system, attaching to them a name that has forever entered the consciousness of millions of people. In 1964, American writer Vincent Gaddis introduced the term that would later become iconic to the general public. In his article, he combined well-known cases, such as the disappearance of the Mary Celeste and the sinking of the Cyclops, which had been the subject of speculation for decades. Gaddis described an area bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and San Juan as an anomalous zone where unexplained disappearances occur. In his work, he relied on archival materials, newspaper chronicles, and maritime reports, seasoning them with a fair amount of drama, which could not fail to capture the attention of readers. Explanations for the disappearances were based on a bizarre mixture of scientific hypotheses and fantastic assumptions. The author mentioned magnetic anomalies, referring to old stories about compass malfunctions, although he did not provide convincing evidence. He also drew attention to unusual weather phenomena, such as sudden storms, and hinted at the existence of underwater currents capable of dragging ships into the abyss. In some places, Gaddis did not rule out the intervention of extraterrestrial forces or mysterious energies, which undoubtedly fueled public interest. The publication caused unprecedented excitement. Intrigued by the idea of a mysterious section of the ocean, readers actively discussed it in letters, conversations, and on the pages of various publications. Gaddis was not the discoverer of these stories. He merely gave them form, named them, and marked the boundaries on the map, turning disparate events into a single legend. His work served as a source of inspiration for many books, articles, and studies, and the term Bermuda Triangle quickly gained popularity beyond the United States. By the 1970s, this idea had firmly entered mass culture, fueling interest in both old and new incidents. Subsequently, Gaddis developed this theme in his book Invisible Horizons, 1965, supplementing it with new cases and assumptions, which further strengthened the image of the triangle as a mysterious and anomalous place. The story of Gaddis and his article has been preserved in the original editions and subsequent publications of the author, including the aforementioned book Invisible Horizons. Despite the fact that these materials are based on real events, their questionable format and the author's tendency to exaggerate, expressed in hints of the supernatural without any evidence, cast doubt on their scientific value, which is confirmed when compared with archival data. Thus, a sinister legend was born, skillfully intertwining the ominous rumors of the 19th century with the mysterious disappearances of the 20th century, giving rise to a frightening phenomenon that continues to stir the minds of humanity to this day. By the mid-20th century, these treacherous waters had become an ominous arena not only for the unexplained disappearance of ships, but also for the sudden vanishing of airplanes, expanding the boundaries of this inexplicable mystery in the era of rapid aviation development. One of the most tragic and high-profile incidents which forever cemented the area's ill repute was the infamous Flight 19, which occurred in 1945 U.S. Navy bombers and a rescue plane that bravely set out to help their distressed comrades seemingly dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only fragments of radio transmissions filled with despair and new questions that continue to haunt researchers and enthusiasts to this day. On December 5, 1940, 5 Avenger torpedo bombers proudly took to the skies from the Naval Air Station located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a routine training flight under the experienced command of Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a pilot with an impressive record of 2,000 flight hours, a decorated World War II veteran. On board were 14 people, Taylor himself, 13 cadets, and instructors performing important navigation and bombing tasks over the vast expanse of the ocean. The mission was clear and standard. Fly to the treacherous Hen and Chicken Shoals, drop practice bombs, and safely return to base via the picturesque Bahama Islands. The route ran through a dangerous area located between sunny Florida, the mysterious Bermuda Islands, and the exotic Bahamas, a region long known for its inexplicable oddities and anomalies. The weather on that fateful day remained surprisingly clear, with a light, refreshing breeze and excellent visibility, promising a calm and uneventful flight. The takeoff began promptly at 2 p.m., and the group confidently headed towards the shoals. However, just an hour and a half later, alarming and anxious radio messages began to arrive from the base. Taylor anxiously reported, "Compasses have suddenly gone out of order. We don't know where we are." His voice clearly conveyed confusion, which was completely uncharacteristic of such an experienced and cool-headed pilot. One of the cadets anxiously added, "For some reason, we are flying east, but we need to be going west," indicating a significant deviation from the assigned course. Then Taylor reported with bewilderment, "The ocean looks very strange. It doesn't look like it should." The communications became increasingly chaotic and incoherent, with the pilots panicking about a complete loss of orientation, even though the bright sun was still shining overhead. At 4:25 p.m., the last desperate message was recorded. "We are entering some white water. We are completely lost." White water is a term usually used to describe foamy waves, but in clear and sunny weather, this sounded completely inexplicable and remains one of the main mysteries of this tragic incident. After that, communication suddenly ceased. All these messages were confirmed by base recordings, although strong interference and overlapping voices distorted some phrases, making them difficult to distinguish. The base reacted instantly. At 6:20 p.m., a Martin Mariner seaplane with 13 brave people on board took off on an urgent search for the missing squadron. It was a reliable aircraft, specially designed for rescue operations, with a huge fuel reserve designed for long hours of flight. Just 20 minutes later, the Mariner reported entering the search area, but soon communication with it also suddenly and inexplicably ceased. That same evening, the Navy launched a massive search operation for the missing aircraft. More than 20 ships and 250 aircraft thoroughly surveyed a vast area of 300,000 square miles, including the Bahamas and the Gulf Stream. The search lasted for 5 days, but no trace of the 27 missing people was ever found. The U.S. Navy investigation began the next day. The communication records, the technical condition of the aircraft, and the meteorological data were carefully checked. It turned out that all the Avengers were in good condition before takeoff and had full fuel tanks. The main suspect became Taylor, who was suspected of making a navigational error. It was assumed that he could have mistaken the Bahamas for Florida and accidentally led the group into the open ocean, but the mass failure of compasses on all machines remained completely inexplicable and defied logical explanation. The theory that the Martin Mariner might have exploded due to mysterious disappearances in the skies, a story full of mystery and speculation. Early in the morning, at 6:30 a.m., the crew of the merchant ship Gaines Mills witnessed an unexplained flash in the sky, but the search for any material evidence yielded no results. It is noteworthy that the meteorological conditions that day remained surprisingly stable, with nothing foretelling an impending storm. Meanwhile, amateur radio operators in sunny Miami picked up fragments of mysterious radio signals. One claimed to have heard a phrase sounding like a desperate confession. "Looks like we're over the Gulf of Mexico." However, the veracity of this information was never confirmed. This incident catalyzed a plethora of incredible theories and assumptions. According to the official Navy version, the Avenger Squadron may have strayed off course due to a sudden failure of navigation equipment, leading to a fatal miscalculation and, consequently, a flight eastward until fuel exhaustion. As for the Martin Mariner flying boat, its disappearance was attributed to an explosion, the causes of which remained unexplained. However, the aura of mystery surrounding the Bermuda Triangle only fueled public interest and spawned a wave of rumors and speculations. Newspaper publications in the 1950s suggested that the vanished mission might have been of a secret nature, involving testing new weapons or conducting reconnaissance operations over the Caribbean. However, Navy documentation only indicates routine training flights. Among alternative theories, special emphasis was placed on the abduction of aircraft by extraterrestrial civilizations. Strange white spots on the water were interpreted as traces of an alien ship or even as a portal to another dimension. There were also hypotheses about temporal anomalies, allegedly swallowing aircraft and transferring them to a parallel reality, which was reflected in science fiction inspired by Gaddis's article. Despite the lack of any convincing evidence, these extravagant ideas were actively discussed in the press and became topics for numerous books. This case was only the first link in a chain of mysterious disappearances of aircraft. 3 years later, in 1948, a Douglas DC-3 passenger plane vanished without a trace in the same area, managing to transmit only a short radio message. There were 32 people on board whose fate remained unknown. This tragic story adds another dark chapter to the chronicle of unexplained phenomena, taking us back to an era when aviation was just beginning its journey. On a frosty December day in 1948, specifically the 28th, a Douglas DC-3 aircraft belonging to the Airborne Transport Airline took off from San Juan, heading for sunny Miami, Florida. This charter flight carried 29 passengers mostly Puerto Ricans returning home after Christmas celebrations, as well as a crew of 3, led by experienced Captain Robert Lindquist. The plane lifted off at 10:00 p.m. local time with enough fuel for a 5-hour flight. The skies were clear, the wind barely perceptible, and visibility was excellent. It seemed that nature itself favored this night journey over the vast ocean, stretching for 400 miles. The flight proceeded without incident until midnight, when the Douglas DC-3 contacted air traffic controllers in Miami. Captain Lindquist reported, "We are 50 miles from you. Flight is proceeding normally." These words were the last heard from the aircraft. At that moment, the aircraft was 180 miles from Miami, crossing the infamous Bermuda Triangle zone. Suddenly, communication was interrupted, leaving not the slightest trace, no distress signals, no hints of technical malfunctions or other problems. When the Douglas DC-3 did not arrive at its destination at the scheduled time around 2:00 a.m. on December 29th, controllers immediately raised the alarm. Search and rescue operations began, but the fate of the flight remained a mystery. With the first rays of the sun, a large-scale search operation began. The United States Navy and Coast Guard units deployed their ships and aircraft to thoroughly comb the alleged route of the vanished aircraft. The search area covered vast territories, stretching over thousands of square miles, including the coastal waters of the Bahamas and the powerful Gulf Stream current. Rescuers, with unquenchable hope, searched for any signs of the crash. Debris, lifeboats, characteristic oil slicks on the ocean surface. However, their efforts remained futile. One of the search team pilots reported a weak radio signal recorded at 3:00 a.m., which could theoretically have come from the missing Douglas DC-3. But the signal was too weak and quickly disappeared, leaving no possibility of accurately confirming its source. Continuous searches continued for several days, but despite all efforts, not a single trace of the 32 people on board could be found. The ocean, like an impregnable guardian, once again fell silent, taking with it another unsolved mystery. The investigation initiated by the Civil Aviation Authority faced an almost complete absence of any tangible evidence. It is known that the aircraft underwent all necessary technical checks in San Juan immediately before departure. The aircraft's engines were in good working order, and the fuel level met the requirements for the flight. Pilot Lindquist, who was piloting the aircraft, was considered an experienced and reliable professional. His co-pilot and flight engineer also had impeccable reputations and a high level of qualification. The weather conditions on the night of the aircraft's disappearance remained stable and favorable. No storms or turbulence zones were recorded. According to data from the meteorological services of Miami and San Juan, all of the aircraft's radio equipment was thoroughly checked before departure and was in fully operational condition. The mysterious disappearance of the Douglas DC-3 aircraft, surrounded by speculation and theories, began with the commonplace message, "All is well," which, however, became the last thread connecting the aircraft to the ground. After that, communication was lost, giving rise to a whole range of assumptions about the causes of the tragedy. The official version leaned towards a technical malfunction, possibly a sudden engine failure or a fire on board. However, the absence of a distress signal, which the crew was obliged to send in an emergency, cast doubt on this hypothesis. Some experts pointed to human error, suggesting that the pilot may have made a navigational error, but this argument seemed unconvincing given the simplicity of the route and the favorable weather conditions that night. Soon, rumors came into play, fueled by the Bermuda Triangle's dark reputation. There was talk of mysterious magnetic anomalies capable of confusing even the most modern navigation devices, or a sudden storm that arose out of nowhere and was not recorded by meteorological stations. The press of the 1950s, not averse to sensationalism, put forward an extravagant theory about the abduction of the plane by aliens, drawing parallels with the mysterious disappearance of Flight 9. But as with other hypotheses, no convincing evidence was presented. The story of the Douglas DC-3 is still stored in the archives of the American Civil Aviation Authority and newspaper clippings from 1948. These materials are based on the testimonies of air traffic controllers who received the last messages from the plane and the data from the search operation launched immediately after the plane's disappearance. But the absence of debris that could shed light on what happened leaves many questions unanswered. The most plausible version is still a technical malfunction that led to a rapid and inevitable catastrophe. But even in this case, the exact cause of the tragedy remains undetermined, turning the disappearance of the Douglas DC-3 into one of the most famous mysteries in aviation. Continuing the series of mysterious disappearances, one cannot fail to recall the Witchcraft boat, which disappeared without a trace in '97. This story, shrouded in mystery, occurred almost 2 decades after the incident with the Douglas DC-3, transferring the mystery of the disappearance into the depths of the waters in the era of modern technology. It differs from other similar cases in its proximity to the shore and the striking speed with which the ship sank into oblivion, leaving behind only an ominous silence where voices had recently been heard. On a December evening, the 2nd of December 1907, a yacht called Witchcraft departed from the shores of Miami, Florida. It was a small vessel, only 7 meters long, owned by Dan Burak, a local entrepreneur and passionate fan of sea adventures. On board, in addition to the owner himself, was his close friend, a priest named Patrick Hogan. They planned to take a short walk along the picturesque coast to enjoy the magnificent spectacle of the Christmas lights of Miami, reflected in the water surface. The yacht left the pier at approximately 7 p.m., heading for buoy number 7, located 1 mile from the shore. At 9 p.m., the Coast Guard received an alarm signal from the Witchcraft. Dan Burak said in an excited voice, "We have a problem. We ran into something. We need urgent help." It is noteworthy that his voice sounded calm, without a hint of panic, which indicated the insignificance of the damage. Perhaps the ship's propeller caught on a treacherous reef or the wreckage of a sunken ship. He specified his location, focusing on buoy number 7, located within a mile of the shore, and insisted on a tow. The dispatcher assured him that help would arrive within 20 minutes and asked Barak to launch a flare to facilitate the search for the distressed vessel. Barak agreed, and the communication session was completed. The Coast Guard boat reached the ill-fated buoy number 7 at 9:19 p.m. 19 minutes after the distress call, rescuers arrived to find a calm sea and excellent visibility. The lights of Miami twinkled in the distance, but the yacht had seemingly vanished into the night. There was no sign of the witchcraft, nor any indication of Barak or Hogan's presence. A thorough search of the area yielded nothing. Rescuers looked for flares, wreckage, or oil slicks on the surface, but their efforts were in vain. The search area was expanded to 200 miles along the coastline, involving Navy ships and aircraft. The relentless search continued for several days, but neither the yacht nor its passengers were found. A vessel that had been only a mile from shore had disappeared into the depths in a matter of minutes. The Coast Guard investigation stalled, confronted with inexplicable circumstances. The witchcraft was in excellent condition, having recently passed all necessary inspections. It had an inflatable life raft and life jackets on board, which Barak, unfortunately, did not have time to use. Buoy number 7 was in shallow water, no more than 5 meters deep, which ruled out the possibility of the vessel sinking without a severe storm. Yet the weather that night remained clear and calm. The radio was functioning properly, and the signal was clear and strong, disproving any communication issues. Witnesses on shore claimed to have seen the yacht's lights until 9 o'clock that evening, but after the distress call, they suddenly disappeared. There were no known reefs or underwater obstructions in the area, although Barak had mentioned a collision in his last transmission. This mysterious case spawned many diverse theories and speculations. The Coast Guard suggested that the yacht may have sunk due to a hidden breach in the hull, but the absence of any debris cast doubt on this theory. Local sailors whispered about a strong current that could have carried the vessel into the Gulf Stream, but even then, the speed of the current could not explain the yacht's rapid disappearance in such a short period. Alongside these assumptions, other equally extravagant versions circulated in the public consciousness, including the abduction of the crew and passengers by alien civilizations, or the sudden appearance of a giant whirlpool pulling vessels to the bottom of the sea. However, no matter how colorful these hypotheses were, they were not supported by any convincing evidence. The press of the 1960s, fueling public interest in this mysterious story, actively discussed the possible connection of this incident with the infamous Flight 19, only intensifying the mystical aura surrounding the event. These publications relied on surviving radio communications and eyewitness accounts, but the lack of physical evidence to shed light on the true causes of the tragedy left gaping holes in the picture of what happened. The most likely version of what happened seems to be the hypothesis of a sudden breakdown and rapid sinking of the vessel. It is possible that the cause of the disaster may have been a collision with some invisible underwater object, but the exact cause could not be determined. Disappearances of ships in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean have confronted humanity with the inexplicable for many centuries, prompting a search for causes hidden in the depths of these waters. The Bermuda Triangle, infamous for its many mysterious disappearances of ships and aircraft, has become an arena where science is trying to solve this complex puzzle. Among the hypotheses based on scientific facts, special attention is paid to assumptions about magnetic anomalies. This phenomenon, related to the peculiarities of the Earth's geomagnetic field, potentially can affect navigation devices in the region. Our planet is surrounded by an invisible magnetic field created by the movement of molten iron in its core. This field serves as a kind of guide, directing compass needles to magnetic north and helping navigators and pilots determine the correct course. However, it is important to note that this field is not uniform, and its characteristics can vary significantly in different parts of the globe. In certain areas of the globe, deviations in compass readings are observed, caused by the peculiarities of the geological structure or fluctuations in the lines of the magnetic field. Of particular interest is the area known as the Bermuda Triangle, where there is a unique convergence of true and magnetic north. Geographic north, the point of intersection of all meridians, and magnetic north, determined by the Earth's magnetic field, are located much closer to each other here than in most other regions of the planet. This circumstance creates a zone where compasses may give inaccurate readings, deviating from the expected direction. Scientists estimate that the difference between true north and magnetic north in this area reaches 10 to 15 degrees. For someone without specialized knowledge and relying solely on a compass, such a deviation can lead to serious navigational errors, taking a ship or aircraft hundreds of miles off course. Historical evidence indicates that sailors encountered similar failures in the western Atlantic Ocean as early as the 10th century, when navigational instruments began to show anomalous readings for no apparent reason. Modern geophysical studies confirm the presence of magnetic anomalies in this region. In particular, magnetometers used in expeditions in the 1970s recorded local distortions of the magnetic field near the Bermuda and Bahama Islands. Scientists believe that these distortions are associated with the peculiarities of the underwater terrain and the dynamics of magnetic lines connecting the equator and the poles. The scientific hypothesis explaining this phenomenon is based on data about the Earth's magnetic field and its complex structure. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration points out that within the ill-fated triangle, the Earth's magnetic field is subject to significant fluctuations. Experts believe that these variations are exacerbated by the unique geological characteristics of this zone, including the presence of extensive shallow banks and complex faults in the Earth's crust. Nevertheless, it should be emphasized that these anomalies do not in themselves represent a destructive force. Their impact is mainly limited to the effect on navigational instruments. In particular, they are able to introduce significant errors in the readings of magnetic compasses. However, with the advent of the 20th century and the introduction of gyro compasses, as well as modern satellite navigation systems, the destructive influence of these magnetic anomalies has significantly decreased. However, for ships and aircraft of past eras, which relied entirely on simple and imperfect navigation instruments, such magnetic deviations could pose a very serious threat, capable of leading to tragic consequences. The hypothesis of magnetic anomalies as a factor influencing navigation in this region has been reflected in the scientific works of geophysicists since the mid-20th century, when the first systematic measurements of the magnetic field were carried out in this area. These studies were based on data collected during numerous marine expeditions, as well as careful observations of the behavior of magnetic compasses in the open sea. The assumption of magnetic anomalies can explain some navigation failures, but leaves unanswered the question of why some mysterious disappearances of ships and aircraft occurred even in clear weather and with experienced crews. This fact forces scientists to consider other scientific hypotheses, in particular the theory of methane emissions, which will be discussed later. The next hypothesis directs the gaze into the depths of the ocean to methane emissions, a natural phenomenon with the potential to radically transform the marine environment. This concept is based on the geological features of the seabed and offers an explanation for the sudden disappearances of ships, leaving no trace in this turbulent region. Methane arises in the depths of sedimentary rocks on the ocean floor, where organic remains, from ancient algae to microscopic organisms, decompose in the absence of oxygen. Under high pressure, this gas is converted into clathrates, frozen structures that resemble ice. In the western Atlantic Ocean, such deposits are found in shallow areas and along the continental shelf, especially in areas of tectonic faults that disrupt stability. When the temperature or pressure changes, caused by underwater movements or currents, the clathrates break down, releasing gas bubbles that rush to the surface at tremendous speed, sometimes forming columns hundreds of meters high. This poses a serious threat to ships. Water supersaturated with methane bubbles loses its density. Instead of the usual density of 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter, the density of water in the methane emission zone decreases by tens of times. A ship that finds itself in this area instantly loses its buoyancy and sinks to the bottom in a matter of seconds without being able to send a distress signal. Studies conducted in the laboratory in the 1980s clearly demonstrated that even small vessels disappear underwater almost instantly when such an emission occurs. Scientists suggest that large methane bubbles could have sunk even large ships, and their wreckage was subsequently carried away by powerful ocean currents, similar to those that wash the coasts. Aircraft did not escape this fate either. Methane, when released into the atmosphere, rises to flight altitudes, significantly altering its composition. An aircraft engine that ingests a mixture with a high concentration of methane may suddenly stall due to disruption of the fuel combustion process. Furthermore, turbulence caused by powerful gas emissions can destabilize the flight. In the 90s, geologists confirmed the presence of methane hydrates in bottom sediments along the Bahamian banks, and underwater surveys revealed craters and faults that are evidence of past gas eruptions. The methane emission hypothesis has been reflected in geochemists' scientific papers since the 1980s and continues to attract the attention of researchers seeking to unravel the mysteries of maritime disasters. As a result of meticulous analysis of bottom sediments, a series of experiments in basins, and the study of similar phenomena in other marine areas, scientists have put forward a hypothesis about the mechanism of the traceless disappearance of ships. According to this theory, an extremely rare confluence of circumstances is necessary for such a scenario to occur. The underwater emission must occur directly beneath a passing vessel. However, the aquatic element holds other, no less dangerous forces. These are the so-called rogue waves, known in maritime folklore as killer waves, which can reach heights of 30 meters. This concept allows us to look at the dynamics of water masses from a new angle and suggests that giant waves may have been the cause of many disasters in this region. Such waves arise from the complex interaction of winds and currents, which, converging at one point, repeatedly amplify each other. They are significantly larger than ordinary storm waves, exceeding their height by 2 to 3 times, and arise quite suddenly. Even in calm seas, a wall of water of colossal size can unexpectedly appear. For a long time, the existence of such waves was considered nothing more than a marine legend until a satellite recorded a wave 25 meters high off the coast of Norway in 1990. In the western Atlantic Ocean, where warm and cold currents collide, especially in areas where coastal winds meet ocean currents, favorable conditions are created for the emergence of rogue waves. Studies show that in this region, such phenomena occur much more often than in other parts of the world's oceans, due to the complex dynamics of currents. People who have encountered these waves and survived describe the experience as unimaginable. One sailor, recounting an incident that happened to him off the coast of Florida in the 1970s, recalled how his ship was covered by a wave comparable in height to a 10-story building. The ship tilted almost to the critical limit, but managed to withstand, although everything on deck was washed overboard. Eyewitnesses recalled a deafening roar like thunder and how small vessels instantly disappeared under the onslaught of the elements. These stories testified to the colossal force capable of destroying ships or dragging them into the abyss, leaving behind only minor debris. Oceanographers, using satellite data and buoys, have found that the probability of rogue waves is especially high along the routes of warm currents in the western Atlantic Ocean. Computer models show points where wave crests can reach a height of 30 meters due to the effects of wind and currents. Aircraft flying at high altitudes are out of danger, but low-flying aircraft may enter areas of turbulence caused by these giant waves. Studies by scientists conducted since the 90s and based on the results of measurements and eyewitness accounts confirm this hypothesis, pointing to the hidden power of the ocean, which may have played a role in the mysterious disappearances. Rogue waves have demonstrated how huge masses of water are capable of crushing ships in the western Atlantic. But even after such crushing blows, it remains a mystery where the traces of shipwrecks disappear. Perhaps the answer lies in the Gulf Stream, a powerful current with a speed of up to 8 km/h, which carries everything in its path. This hypothesis draws our attention to the dynamics of ocean masses, showing how nature is able to erase evidence of disasters in this region. The Gulf Stream originates in the Gulf of Mexico and extends along the east coast of North America. In the coastal waters of Florida lies a giant water flow up to 100 kilometers wide and up to 800 meters deep. This colossal carrier of water masses pumps millions of cubic meters of water per second, demonstrating impressive power. The Gulf Stream, whose speed reaches 8 kilometers per hour, stands out from other currents, deservedly taking its place as one of the most powerful water flows on the planet. Warm waters, heated to 25 degrees, rush from south to north, bypassing the Bahamas and heading towards Europe. This invisible aquatic conveyor belt plays a crucial role in shaping the climate and ecosystem of this corner of the Atlantic Ocean. However, the power of the Gulf Stream poses a significant obstacle in search and rescue operations. In the event of shipwrecks or plane crashes, the current interferes, picking up debris, lifeboats, and fuel spills, carrying them tens of kilometers within hours. For instance, wreckage that ends up in the water off the coast of Florida can be found off the coast of North Carolina, 700 kilometers to the north, in just one day. This current speed makes rescue operations extremely difficult and sometimes practically useless. By the time rescue teams arrive, debris and victims are far from the crash site or have sunk into the depths of the ocean, dragged down by turbulent eddies at the edges of the flow. Oceanographers confirmed back in the 1980s, using drifting buoys, that objects entering the Gulf Stream move at tremendous speed, and turbulent eddies can pull them to great depths. Sailors have repeatedly witnessed cargo from damaged ships being found hundreds of miles from the site of the accident, clearly demonstrating the power and unpredictability of this mighty current. Although water currents do not pose a direct threat to aircraft, debris from downed aircraft can be carried away by currents, significantly hindering search operations. The concept, based on the analysis of speed data, satellite data, and observations of object movement since the mid-20th century, emphasizes how the ocean depths could conceal the consequences of tragic events. Further research will focus on atmospheric impacts. Rapid currents can sweep shipwreck debris away in the western Atlantic Ocean, leaving search and rescue teams empty-handed. Nevertheless, the roots of these tragedies often lie in phenomena occurring above the water, not below it. Atmospheric factors, such as hurricanes and microbursts, shift the focus to the airspace, where winds and pressure changes create conditions that can lead to the loss of ships and aircraft. This hypothesis is supported by an analysis of meteorological data that recorded the power of the elements in this region. Hurricanes, those colossal whirlwinds, originate over the warm waters of the Atlantic, where the surface temperature exceeds 26 degrees Celsius. They form when moisture-laden air rises, cools, and condenses, releasing energy that spins winds up to speeds exceeding 118 kilometers per hour. In the area stretching between Florida and the Caribbean islands, the hurricane season lasts from June to November, peaking in September. The chronicles of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration record the evidence of their devastating power. In 1969, Hurricane Camille, like an enraged beast, slammed into the shores of Mississippi, racing with wind speeds reaching 300 kilometers. It relentlessly smashed ships like matchsticks and flooded coastal lands with giant waves rising to a height of up to 7 meters. Such natural disasters possess monstrous power, capable of sending ships to the bottom of the sea and posing a serious threat to aircraft flying at low altitudes, especially if they find themselves in the epicenter of violent gusts of wind. Microbursts represent a different danger, less massive but no less treacherous. They originate in the depths of thunderclouds when streams of cold air rush downward at tremendous speed, crashing onto the Earth's surface with a force of up to 1,000 km/h. Unlike hurricanes, their area of operation is limited to a few kilometers, but their destructive energy is concentrated in this small area. The wind pressure generated by a microburst can easily overturn small vessels or cause irreparable damage to aircraft wings. Weather archives preserve a record of a tragic incident that occurred in 1982 off the coast of Florida, when a sudden microburst tore a yacht from its anchor and threw it onto the shore in a matter of minutes. Another sad case occurred in 1908 near the Bahamas, where a fishing vessel sank under the onslaught of a sudden squall, although no storm warnings were issued. For aviation, microbursts pose a particular hazard due to sudden and unpredictable wind shifts. Pilots entering a microburst zone during takeoff or landing face a sudden and critical loss of altitude, which can lead to catastrophic consequences. In the 1980s, meteorologists began actively using radar to detect and study these dangerous phenomena, revealing their frequent occurrence in the warmer months along the Atlantic coast. Hurricanes, on the other hand, leave behind a wider and more devastating trail. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew swept over Florida, destroying dozens of ships in ports and severely damaging rescue helicopters flying at low altitudes. The archives of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as well as meteorological stations in the Caribbean, contain information about these atmospheric phenomena. This data, collected from radar readings, eyewitness accounts, and weather reports, covers the period from the mid-20th century. However, the capricious weather in this region hides more elusive processes that can only be seen from a bird's-eye view. Hexagonal clouds, discovered through data obtained by NASA, indicate the existence of turbulent zones over the ocean where these unusual celestial formations can create dangerous conditions below. This hypothesis is based on space observations that reveal the hidden dynamics of the atmosphere over this corner of the globe. Hexagonal clouds are unique formations characterized by clear boundaries resembling honeycombs. They arise when cold air descends into warm layers above the water surface, forming convection cells. Unlike chaotic storm clouds, these structures take on a geometric shape due to the uniform distribution of air currents. NASA recorded such clouds over the western Atlantic Ocean using the Terra satellite and the MODIS instrument, a medium-resolution spectrometer. In '92, images taken with this device showed the presence of these clouds over the Bahamas. Their sizes ranged from 30 to 80 kilometers across, and they were located near a zone where warm waters create atmospheric instability. The phenomenon of turbulence reaching the water surface is due to the formation of descending air currents, called microbursts, which, despite their smaller scale compared to storm phenomena, pose a serious danger. Data obtained by NASA in '92 indicate that such flows can cause winds reaching speeds of upon impact with the water surface, leading to the formation of waves up to 14 meters high. Studies using radar in the 2010s confirmed that turbulent zones occur with increased frequency over certain regions during the warmer months, when the temperature difference between water and air becomes particularly pronounced. For marine vessels, such conditions pose a tangible threat. Sudden gusts of wind can lead to capsizing or deviation from the intended course. Aircraft, especially those at low altitudes, are at risk of colliding with abrupt wind shifts that can disrupt control. The weather archives of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration cite cases, such as the '98 incident when a fishing vessel off the coast of Florida was hit by a sudden wind associated with a similar cloud structure and lost part of its cargo, despite the fact that the sea had been calm until that moment. The theory of hexagonal clouds, supported by data from NASA satellites and long-term weather observations since the '90s, is based on the analysis of images and measurements of air currents. This data demonstrates how clouds of unusual geometric shape can generate increased local turbulence. Research emphasizes the significant role of atmospheric phenomena in the formation of potentially dangerous zones, while acknowledging that their influence is limited to specific conditions. Hexagonal clouds have left a mark in the form of turbulent zones and strict scientific conclusions. In contrast to this scientific approach is a world of assumptions and theories where the boundaries of the possible are blurred. The first point in this alternative investigation is Atlantis, a mythical island whose sunken artifacts, according to enthusiasts, continue to affect the waters of the western Atlantic, causing mysterious disappearances of ships and aircraft. This hypothesis is rooted in ancient texts, predictions, and bold speculation. Atlantis was first mentioned in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias, created around 360 BC. The Greek philosophers described it as a powerful civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, modern Gibraltar, in the Atlantic Ocean. According to his stories, it was an island with advanced technologies, an impressive fleet, a system of canals, golden walls, and temples ruled by wise kings. However, on one tragic day, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea as a result of the wrath of the gods. Plato referred to the stories of Egyptian priests passed down to Solon. Historians still argue about whether this story was based on real events or was a philosophical parable about the fate of arrogant empires. Science fiction writers, inspired by this theme, transfer it to the western Atlantic Ocean. In their opinion, the legendary Atlantis rests somewhere near the Bahamas banks or in the Caribbean Sea, and its flooded mechanisms, whether energy crystals, electromagnetic generators, or even devices using anti-gravity, are still functioning. In the 1920s, American seer Edgar Cayce claimed that in his visions he saw the remains of Atlantis near the island of Bimini and predicted their discovery in 1908. To the surprise of many in that year, a group of divers did indeed discover the so-called Bimini Road, unusual stone slabs located underwater off the coast of North Bimini. This discovery was made by Dr. Joseph Manson Valentine, a biologist with a passion for underwater mysteries, along with a group of scuba divers. These slabs, reaching 6 meters in length and located at a depth of 5 meters, form a structure resembling a pavement and were immediately declared by enthusiasts to be the remains of an ancient civilization. But that's just the beginning. In the 1970s, divers began reporting the discovery of underwater pyramids in the Bahamas. In 1907, an expedition led by American researcher Ari Marshall allegedly discovered near the island of Cay Sal an underwater structure 40 meters high with smooth faces, resembling the Egyptian pyramids. According to the stories, in the crystal clear water, the pyramid seemed like a mirage, and a strange hum was felt underfoot. These finds fueled theories that these were Atlantis energy stations emitting waves that disable compasses and engines. Some even suggest that the pyramids and the Bimini Road are connected into a single network controlled by ancient mechanisms. Despite the enthusiasm of supporters of the Atlantis theory, the scientific community remains cautiously skeptical. A geological study of the so-called Bimini Road, conducted in the 1980s, revealed its natural origin. Scientists concluded that this is a limestone formation created by powerful tidal currents over millennia and has nothing to do with human activity. The underwater pyramids off the coast of Cay Sal have also been questioned. Dives by divers did not reveal any traces of stone processing characteristic of man-made structures. The photographs presented by Marshall sparked lively discussions, but many experts saw only natural geological formations in the captured objects. Plato's mentions of a catastrophe that occurred 9,000 years ago are also not confirmed by archaeological data. Science does not know of civilizations of that time that possessed the technologies necessary to build Atlantis. The first urban settlements, such as Jericho, arose much later and contain no evidence of the use of advanced technologies such as crystals or complex mechanisms. Enthusiasts fascinated by the idea of Atlantis explain magnetic anomalies and mysterious disappearances of ships by the machinations of an ancient civilization. However, These claims are not supported by convincing evidence and remain mere speculation. The story of Atlantis lives on in Plato's philosophical dialogues, Edgar Cayce's prophetic visions, and numerous books. To this myth were added the stories of divers, such as Valentine and Marshall, who allegedly discovered traces of an ancient civilization underwater. However, all this evidence relies on interpretations of ancient texts, subjective dreams, and controversial finds, rather than strict scientific facts. Thus, Atlantis remains a fascinating but still fantasy, stirring the imagination, but not withstanding criticism from the point of view of science. This pushes researchers and enthusiasts to search for new explanations for mysterious phenomena, drawing their attention to another popular theory, the theory of extraterrestrial intervention, which will be discussed further. In the mid-20th century, when mysterious incidents in the Western Atlantic began to attract public attention, the hypothesis arose about the involvement of extraterrestrial civilizations in these mysteries. By the 1950s, the first reports began to appear in periodicals about unusual objects seen in the sky over the ocean, glowing spheres and disc-shaped silhouettes. A real explosion of interest occurred in the 1970s, when stories of abductions and eyewitness accounts reached a climax. Opinions began to circulate in society that alien beings use this area of the Atlantic Ocean as a testing ground for their operations, perhaps moving aircraft there for research or experiments. One of the most striking episodes of that time was the story of the captain of a cargo ship, who in 1960 reported observing 3 orange lights hovering over his ship near the coast of Florida. According to him, the lights moved in unison, then instantly soared upwards and disappeared, plunging the crew into bewilderment. This incident was widely reported in the press and sparked new ufological theories. In 1974, scuba diver Robert Palmer, while diving in the Bahamas, recounted witnessing a luminous, disc-shaped object emerge from the water and shoot into the sky. His story was published in a magazine, which suggested that it was an extraterrestrial vehicle emerging from an underwater base. In 1975, a fisherman from Bermuda claimed to have seen a shiny object hovering over his boat, after which he lost consciousness and awoke several hours later in a different location, 20 miles from his original position. Abduction stories multiplied. In 1976, a private pilot presented another striking testimony that stirred public interest. He claimed to have witnessed a giant triangular object hovering over the vast expanse of the ocean. According to the pilot, the object emitted a bright glow and moved at incredible speed, defying the laws of physics before disappearing without a trace. This story was widely broadcast on the radio, fueling belief in the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations and their possible presence on Earth. These UFO stories were closely intertwined with the concept of underwater bases hidden in the depths of the ocean. In the 1970s, divers reported mysterious underwater lights rising from the seabed. Ufologists, fascinated by this topic, were quick to associate these phenomena with hypothetical alien bases located beneath the water. In their view, alien ships could rise from these bases, leaving behind luminous trails that stirred the imagination. However, the scientific community remains skeptical of these extraordinary claims. Neither NASA nor the Navy has provided convincing evidence to support extraterrestrial presence in the area. Despite numerous sightings since the 1950s, scientists offer alternative explanations. Luminous spheres seen in the sky could be meteors, ball lightning, or even St. Elmo's fire, electrical discharges in the atmosphere. Tales of alien abductions are explained as either fiction or complex psychological phenomena, such as disorientation under stress. Skeptics emphasize that modern radar systems and satellites have never registered the presence of objects exhibiting unnatural behavior. Thus, eyewitness accounts remain unconfirmed stories, unsupported by scientific data. In the 1970s, interest in the theory of alien intervention was fueled by publications and eyewitness accounts. These stories, supported by the imagination of ufologists, presented the region as a center of alleged extraterrestrial activity. Nevertheless, in the absence of material evidence, this version remains more a figment of the imagination, stirring the imagination and leading to consideration of another hypothesis, temporal anomalies, which will be discussed further. The hypothesis of temporal anomalies suggests that in this region, the laws of time may be distorted, leading to the movement of ships and aircraft into other dimensions or historical periods. One of the most famous cases supporting this version is the flight of Bruce Gernon in 1970, which will be examined in more detail. On December 6, 1970, American pilot and entrepreneur Bruce Gernon made his flight. He took off from Andros Airport in the Bahamas, heading to Palm Beach, Florida, in a small aircraft. His father and a business partner were on board. The 100-mile route passed over the western Atlantic Ocean in an area known for its mystery. The departure took place at 2:00 p.m. in clear weather, clear skies, light winds, and excellent visibility. Gernon planned to complete a standard 45-minute flight with a fuel reserve of 3 hours and standard navigation equipment. Shortly after soaring into the sky at an altitude of about 3,000 meters, Gernon's attention was drawn to an unusual atmospheric phenomenon. A strange cloud appeared ahead, resembling a gray tunnel with clearly defined boundaries, twisted walls, and glimpses of light inside. According to the pilot, what he saw was strikingly different from the usual cloud formations. The cloud was striking in its density and impressive size, reaching approximately 10 miles in diameter, and gave the impression of a man-made object. Deciding to bypass the suspicious phenomenon, Gernon began an evasive maneuver. However, according to his testimony, the cloud seemed to come to life and began to move, seeking to surround the plane. Soon, the aircraft was in the very center of the mysterious structure. Visibility instantly dropped to a critical level, and chaos reigned on the instrument panel. Compasses, altimeter, and radio failed, and the needles darted erratically across the scales. Later, Hernan recounted seeing a dazzling light ahead, and the tunnel walls began to constrict, creating the illusion of rapidly flying through a narrow corridor. But the most incredible event occurred afterward. Just a few minutes later, according to the pilot's watch, about 3 minutes, the plane emerged from the cloud and found itself over Miami, located 100 miles from Andros Island. The flight, which normally takes 45 minutes, was completed in just 27 minutes, with more fuel remaining in the tanks than expected. Hernan claimed that radars in Palm Beach registered the sudden appearance of his aircraft, with no trace of its movement along the previous route on the screens. The pilot dubbed this phenomenon electronic fog and hypothesized a collision with a temporal anomaly, a time warp that allowed him to traverse space at unimaginable speed, defying known laws of physics. Nevertheless, the scientific community questioned such hypotheses. Meteorologists, after carefully studying the circumstances of Hernan's disappearance, suggested the existence of rare atmospheric phenomena capable of causing confusion. In particular, they referred to specific forms of turbulence or mirages, such as superrefraction, where air layers create optical distortions that affect the perception of distance. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, found no time anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle area. Explanations for instrument malfunctions are attributed to either magnetic disturbances or technical failures of the aircraft's electronic equipment. Physicists, in turn, emphasize that creating such temporal anomalies would require energy comparable to that of black holes, which is not observed in this area. Moreover, radar data obtained in Palm Beach and stored in archives since the 1970s do not confirm any time warps. It is quite possible that Hernan may have made an error in estimating time or deviated from the intended route due to a stressful situation. Hernan's story is reflected in his own book, as well as in a number of publications that rely on his personal memories and the conjectures of ufologists who see traces of the influence of temporal portals in this. However, given the lack of scientific confirmation, instrument readings, independent evidence, or any material traces, this version remains nothing more than a bold fantasy. Let's turn to hard facts and impartial figures to find out if the Western Atlantic Ocean is really something out of the ordinary compared to other sea expanses. The Bermuda Triangle has long had a bad reputation as a place where disappearances occur with frightening regularity, exceeding the indicators of other regions. However, hard figures allow us to look at this phenomenon from a different angle, comparing data on incidents in the Bermuda Triangle with information on other dangerous areas, such as the Dragon's Triangle, the treacherous Cape Hatteras, or the ominous Sable Island, helps to understand how unique this stretch of ocean is, or whether its sinister reputation is just a product of wild imagination and lively sea traffic. The Bermuda Triangle occupies an impressive area, stretching approximately 1.5 million square kilometers between sunny Florida, the picturesque Bermuda Islands, and colorful Puerto Rico. In the 20th century, about 50 mysterious disappearances of large seagoing vessels and about 24 aircraft were recorded in this area. According to information provided by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the United States Coast Guard, This number includes both well-known cases, such as the mysterious disappearance of the cargo ship Cyclops in the distant 1918, and less resonant incidents, such as the loss of small fishing boats caught off guard by fierce storms. It is worth noting that thousands of seagoing vessels and hundreds of air flights pass through the Bermuda Triangle every year, connecting the bustling ports of Miami, San Juan, and Bermuda, making it one of the busiest and most sought-after sea routes in the Atlantic. In search of analogies, let's turn our gaze to the Dragon's Triangle, which stretches in the Pacific Ocean between the Japanese islands of Honshu, Okinawa, and Guam. Its possessions cover about 600,000 square kilometers. According to Japanese maritime chronicles of the 20th century, about 40 ships disappeared without a trace here, including the tragic loss of 5 warships in 952 during maneuvers and a fishing vessel in 954. In this region, typhoons rage with fury, reaching 20 mph, and underwater volcanoes linked to the Pacific Ring of Fire create conditions as challenging as the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Other hazardous zones are equally striking in scale. Cape Hatteras, located off the eastern coast of the United States, is ominously nicknamed the Graveyard of the Atlantic. Over 400 years, it has claimed over 1,000 ships, from 15th century sailing vessels to 20th century tankers, such as the vessel that sank in a raging storm in 942. Sable Island, located 375 miles off the Canadian coast, has become the final resting place for 350 ships over 300 years due to treacherous shallow shoals and dense fogs, including a steamship that vanished in 1906. The Drake Passage, separating South America and Antarctica, covering approximately 386,000 square miles, sees dozens of ships perish annually, encountering waves up to 65 feet high and winds reaching 93 mph, as happened to a trawler in 1985. Statistics suggest that the number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is within the normal range for areas with heavy maritime traffic. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, about 100 large sea-going vessels disappeared globally each year in the 20th century, with only a small fraction, approximately 5-6%, occurring in the ill-fated triangle. A similar situation is observed in the Dragon's Triangle. Japanese sources indicate approximately 4 unexplained disappearances per year until the 1980s, often attributed to typhoons or navigational errors. The areas of Cape Hatteras and Sable Island have higher loss rates due to natural features like shallow waters and frequent fogs, but these places are not shrouded in mystical lore. The introduction of modern technologies, including satellite communication, radar systems, and rescue equipment, has significantly reduced incidents in the Bermuda Triangle, decreasing them from the 90s to 2 or 3 per year, consistent with statistics from other maritime regions. Nevertheless, raw numbers do not provide a complete picture of what is happening. Direct evidence hidden in the depths of the sea is needed for a comprehensive analysis. In recent decades, underwater expeditions have focused on discovering wreckage to determine whether the seabed of the Bermuda Triangle holds the remains of missing ships and aircraft, or if it is merely a bottomless abyss surrounded by ominous legends. Since the mid-20th century, inquisitive minds have sought to unravel the mysteries of the deep sea within this anomalous zone. In the 1960s, brave divers and research submarines began exploring the coastal waters near the Bahamas, hoping to find sunken remains of ships or aircraft, similar to those that vanished without a trace in 1945. However, the initial search operations mostly ended in nothing. Powerful ocean currents, such as the Gulf Stream, relentlessly swept debris in unknown directions, and the shifting sands of the seabed quickly buried them under a thick layer. In 1986, an expedition had a rare stroke of luck. A sunken cargo ship that disappeared in 1925 with its cargo of coal was discovered off the coast of Florida. Its hull rested at a depth of 100 feet, but this was more the exception that proved the rule. Deeper waters, reaching 6,500 feet in the central part of the triangle, remained virtually inaccessible for research until the end of the 20th century. In 1991, a scientific team attempted a search north of Bermuda using modern underwater vehicles. The searches revealed only minor debris, fragments of metal and wood, but nothing indicated the presence of large ships or aircraft involved in known cases of mysterious disappearances. In 2015, another expedition armed with a deep-sea vehicle thoroughly surveyed the seabed off the coast of Puerto Rico. However, instead of traces of shipwrecks or plane crashes, researchers found only natural formations, underwater canyons, and sedimentary rocks, bearing no signs of technological impact. All these efforts clearly demonstrate how complex and laborious the task of searching for sunken objects in this region is. Wreckage, if it exists, is either carried away by relentless currents or securely hidden under layers of sand and silt at immense depths, rarely reached by research expeditions. Available data suggests that less than 10% of the seabed within the Bermuda Triangle has been studied in detail, and rare finds are usually related to the aftermath of known storms and hurricanes, rather than mystical phenomena. Nevertheless, the scientific and technological advancements of the late 20th and early 21st centuries have opened new horizons for humanity in exploring the ocean depths. Sonar and underwater drones have become indispensable tools, allowing us to penetrate areas inaccessible to scuba divers. These tools are used to study objects like the famous Bimini Road and other artifacts, aiming to distinguish real geological formations from the myths and legends surrounding the mysterious Bermuda Triangle. In the 1980s, side-scan sonar became widely used for detecting sunken ships and aircraft. In 1987, an expedition conducting research near the Bahamas used sonar to discover the wreckage of an aircraft that disappeared in 1948 at a depth of approximately 100 meters. However, such discoveries are relatively rare. More often, sonar detects monotonous sandy plains or sedimentary rocks, concealing the secrets of the seabed. In 2001, a group of Canadian researchers using sonar near the coast of Cuba discovered symmetrical structures at a depth of 700 meters, which were immediately associated with ancient myths of Atlantis. However, a thorough analysis by geologists revealed that these formations were nothing more than natural volcanic rocks formed by geological processes. The underwater stone slabs located near North Bimini Island have become one of the most well-known and discussed finds in this region. First discovered by a scuba diver in 1998, they were thoroughly investigated using sonar in the 1980s, confirming their impressive size. These slabs, reaching up to 6 meters in length, are located at a depth of about 5 meters and form a strip approximately 700 meters long. Despite the enthusiasm of many who saw this as evidence of an ancient civilization, a detailed study conducted by the Geological Service in 1997 showed that these formations are limestone, formed by the action of tides over millennia, and bear no signs of artificial processing. Unmanned aerial vehicles have opened new horizons in search operations. In 2014, researchers used a drone to discover the remains of a ship that sank in 1926 at a depth of 40 meters off the coast of Florida. In 2016, drones were used to study the waters north of Bermuda, where metallic debris was found, the nature of which remained unclear, possibly ordinary waste or elements of old cargo shipments. In 2018, drones were also used to investigate the so-called Bimini Road, confirming its natural origin and excluding any signs of artificial influence. All data obtained through sonar and drones are carefully archived. They indicate that finds in the Bermuda Triangle area are typically either rare remnants of known shipwrecks or natural formations. In conclusion, what remains of the myths and legends surrounding the Bermuda Triangle when scientific facts come to the forefront? Science has provided answers to many questions, but has it left room for new mysteries to emerge? Statistical data indicate that the number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle does not exceed similar figures in other maritime zones with heavy traffic. Underwater expeditions and the use of modern technologies, in turn, demonstrate that the discovery of wreckage in this area is relatively rare. The seabed is more often deserted than littered with traces of shipwrecks. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, in conjunction with the U.S. Coast Guard, emphasizes that the vast majority of disappearances, reaching an impressive 80%, are due to quite prosaic reasons: the vagaries of the weather, miscalculations by navigators, or simple technical malfunctions. Fierce storms, navigational errors, and sudden equipment failures become fatal factors, determining the sad fate of ships and aircraft, leaving little room for mystical speculation. The renowned researcher Larry Kusha, in his work, convincingly argued that the infamous Bermuda Triangle is nothing more than a myth, inflated from individual sensational stories. Modern statistical data confirm this view, indicating that since the 1990s, the number of mysterious incidents in the Bermuda Triangle area has decreased to a negligible 2 or 3 cases per year. This has been made possible in large part by the rapid development of satellite and radio communications, allowing for the prompt tracking of ships and aircraft. Nevertheless, it is worth acknowledging that some disappearances still lack rational explanations, and the immense depths reaching 3,000 meters continue to guard their dark secrets. Only a small portion of the seabed in this area has been studied in detail, leaving room for various hypotheses. From a scientific standpoint, the Bermuda Triangle is an ordinary section of the ocean, not distinguished by any anomalous properties. However, its ominous legend continues to live on in the public consciousness, stirring the imagination and fueling interest in unexplained phenomena.